Welcome to Gospel Chats with Ryan and Marshall and Keely. Wherever you are, whoever you are, hopefully you're having a great day. I'm excited to chat with you.
I am thrilled.
I love this.
I do too.
I love talking about the gospel of Jesus Christ and wrestling and thinking and growing.
It's been good. I will say it's been amazing. I've learned things that have been applied into my life against my will that have made things better. so which is
good.
Which is good.
And that's exactly what I was hoping for, against your will.
Right.
Now, hopefully it's changing me. The conversations we're having are helping me to grow closer to God.
Yeah.
Which I love.
Yep. Make different decisions. Think differently.
Think differently. If I can think differently, I can understand better.
Yes.
So where are we going?
All right. So one of my very favorite quotes from conference in the past, I wanted to say past couple of years, but then I looked it up and it was a long time ago, which means I'm really old. But so it's from 11 years ago, 11 and a half, from Elder Holland. In his talk on the cost and blessing of discipleship, he makes this statement. He says, from time to time, these same messengers are called upon to worry, to warn, and sometimes just to weep. They know full well that the road leading to the promised land, flowing with milk and honey, of necessity runs by way of Mount Sinai, flowing with thou shalts and thou shalt nots. And Elder Holland has just a way of saying things, but the way he said that there was so beautiful, this idea, and we all know, the Israelites' journey into the promised land, even before they ended up having their little 40-year sojourn for their rebelliousness, it was still not a direct route. God took them to Sinai to give them instruction before they got there. And I love that phrasing of flowing with thou shalts and thou shalt nots. And it sort of stuck with me for a long time, ever since he said this. And this question I have is, what was it about those specific thou shalts and thou shalt nots that they needed to know and understand and incorporate in order to be able to fully enjoy the promised land? Why are those two things combined? And what does it matter? Why do commandments matter, basically?
And not even commandments, as you're saying that, specifically those 10.
Yes, those 10, right?
I was reading something from Cecil B. DeMille, who did the movie 10 Commandments. Yep. And this is paraphrasing, but he said basically a lot of people think that the 10 Commandments are archaic and outdated. And basically his point was the 10 Commandments have never been more relevant and timely. And I think that's still true today. Like those 10 Commandments, those are not... I think some Christians, and not most, but I think some, would almost say, well, that's been fulfilled in Jesus Christ, right? And they want to do this like blanket cover, like even the 10 Commandments, that was all fulfilled. We don't need to do that anymore. And you think, I don't think that's what Jesus said. I'm pretty sure he actually held up those exact commandments and said, no, this is the law.
This is the law and more.
Yes, exactly.
And more.
Let's get at
deeper.
the heart of these laws. Let's make sure that it's not just a surface keeping of these laws, but this is the heart and soul of becoming like God.
Right, and I love how you put that. The reason why we need it is because if we're going to enter into God's presence, into the promised land, we need to know what God's life is like. We need to know what that type of place is like. And as you put heart and soul of God's life is these thou shalts and thou shalt nots. If we want to truly know him, we're going to have to live a certain way. And I want to, actually one of our listeners asked if we could do some things on the 10 Commandments. And so I've then thought of this. I'm like, let's play with it. So today, what I would love to do is rather than play with all 10 Commandments, because that's a lot. And
that's a lot of playing.
We talk a lot way too much anyway. But let's just start from the beginning and just start with the beginning of the commandments. We talked a little bit, I let you know where we were going here. And we talked, should we separate 1 and 2? And we decided to do the first 2 commandments together because they do tend to go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So of course we start in Exodus chapter 20, starting in verse 3 is where I'm going to start with these first 2 commandments. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the 3rd and 4th generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. All right. So we have our start. Thou shalt have no other gods before me, and thou shalt not make any unto thee any graven image.
Yep.
So our starting point, the very first commandment is to have no gods before God. So help us out. There's a really easy way you can look at this and say this is a commandment of the time where there are gods in every single nation, that every nation has their own gods, all these multi-god polytheistic societies, and God speaking to Israelites, and we don't have to worry about that now, but I think that would be a ridiculous statement.
Very narrow.
Very narrow
way to look at it. Obviously, that's part of it, and for them, there would have been very specific gods that had shapes and statues and prayers offered to them and temples built to them. That was very real to them.
Yes.
But this commandment is definitely more inclusive than that.
And once again, I think part of what we're looking at as well is when, even as you mentioned, the Savior, when he's asked what's the great commandment of the law, his immediate response is, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, might, mind, and strength. And we have this. That's not exactly the same wording, but it really is the exact same message.
Yeah.
No gods before thee. All right, so then what does it start to look like? What does this look like? What does it look like to not have any gods before God? What does it look like to not have any graven images in 2025?
I was reading something from President Oaks, and he was talking about the first great commandment, and he did what we're actually going to do. I think he combined it with the second, and he used a word that I thought was just a really good summary for other gods. He used the word priority.
And that, stealing my quote right
Let's
out
go.
from under me.
I was hoping, but it was interesting. I love it when people can say things in simple ways that it can just kind of give me, something to hang on, just a thread to hang some things on. And when I heard the word priority as I was reading that in his talk, I thought, okay, now the Spirit can teach me about my false gods. Like, what are the gods that I put before God? When something takes priority, when something takes precedence, when I'm forced to make a choice between keeping my covenants and serving my God or anything else, if that thing takes priority, for all intents and purposes, that has become my God in that moment.
Yeah.
That's how I took President Oaks' statement.
Well, and I think the key is, and especially one of the things that President Oaks says, and I actually should go there so I don't destroy what he says, talking about priorities, that I found very, very, well, where did it go? Very important here. Apparently, I lost my place.
Wasn't a priority for you to
It was not a priority.
put a prophetic statement at the top of your iPad, who's now the current prophet of this church. Sorry, I'm just trying to stall as you're
I really
it.
appreciate what we're seeing here, brothers and sisters, is what happens when you rely on the arm of the flesh instead of God. So, but he says, the principle is not whether we have other priorities. Are we serving priorities or gods ahead of the God we profess to worship? And I love that distinction, that we can have other priorities. There are other priorities that are of extreme importance in our life that we better not be ignoring.
Yeah.
It's just a question of prioritization of our priorities.
Yes, that there needs to, one of those priorities needs to look different than the others.
Yes. And I would say I not only look different, but we have one of those priorities, the priority, should be informing and influencing the rest of the priorities.
Right. And, okay. So going to another prophet, and this one I think we quote often from President Benson, but it's just so good because it's so true. Why did God put the first commandment first? Because he knew that if we truly loved him, we would want to keep all of his other commandments. When we put God first, all other things fall into their proper place or drop out of our lives. Our love of the Lord will govern the claims for our affection, the demands of our time, the interests we pursue, and the order of our priorities. That has been one of the most true statements of my life. I mean, I could chart my life by that quote.
Yeah.
Like, when I put God, my love for God and my devotion to God as the priority, it really does inform and shape all my other priorities. Using a different word, I love that same thing that President Oaks caught you, it caught me too, because I thought I can love other things using Jesus' words, right? Yeah. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, might, mind, and strength. That doesn't mean you can't love other things.
Yes.
It just means make sure that you love me first, because that will show you how to love the other things appropriately.
And I love that. I love that adverb, right? Appropriately. Because there is a place for these things. There's a place for things that we love, things that we enjoy, things that take up our time in our lives. It's just, is it in the right balance? Is it in the right order? And is it done appropriately?
Yeah.
Which is a huge shift, because I think there is a danger here of being like, okay, well, I will now go be a monk and dedicate myself fully to God and read the scriptures the 12 hours a day that I'm awake. Probably should be awake more than that.
They need a lot of sleep with that much reading.
Apparently so. But that I can't, and God does not expect me to spend all my time in the temple and all my time doing certain things, that I am and allowed to have these other priorities.
There was a sister in my state growing up, and when youth would get together, she would teach them, as far as like dating, she would tell them, find somebody who loves God more than they love you. And sometimes you'd get pushback from some of the youth, like, no, I want my future husband or wife to love me more than they love anything else. But then she taught him this principle, and she said, no, I will promise you something. If you find someone who loves God first, you will always come second, right where you belong. But if you find someone who does not love God first, you have no guarantee.
Yep.
I thought that was just a fascinating teaching. And again, the longer I live, the more I believe that if someone really does love God first, they don't just say it, but they love God first, it really does shape and I guess the word I'm like train.
Yes.
It trains me who and what to love next and how to do that.
Yes.
Right. And then as President Ben says, and then other things that I thought were super important that maybe I was in love with, I start to lose interest for, or at least a love kind of connection to it, that it starts to distance my relationship. I think that's what's supposed to happen. I mean, I'm just thinking of like sports in my life. Like I have gone through where I loved sports, right? I gave much of my life to becoming better at, or watching, or quoting. My wife just gave me grief. She's like, how can you know the statistics of it? And I'm just like going, who doesn't? Like that isn't normal,
What? You don't?
What? You don't? I'm not sure if I want to be married. No. Just kidding. But I just think as I've tried to place God more at the forefront of my life, what's happened with silly things like sports, right? And there's still part of it, sports, that I love, but the appropriateness. What part of that can I love, which is the relationship, which is the exercise, which is just some of that, as opposed to being in love with maybe it in an inappropriate way.
Yeah, right. And I really like that in this moment of things fall in their place, and that thing that wonderful sister said in your steak of, if they choose you first, that might change. And I think one of the things that I think that God really does for us by having us love him first is he is the only thing in the universe that is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Every other thing that we could possibly love and worship ahead of him is changing and will change, and that's a problem. And we're changing at the same time. And what I've found with false gods that I worship is that they are incredibly fickle. And I don't mean just fickle in terms of how they respond to me, which they are fickle in that way, but it's a fickle relationship on my part, because something that I love now is not necessarily something that I loved 10 years ago. And something that I loved 10 years ago is not necessarily something that even matters to me right now. Yeah. I found throughout my life, there's always been little moments where no, this matters. This is important. This is a big deal. And it wasn't. Or even this idea of this is something that will be a big deal for me forever. And then I find out that it's not. Mm-hmm. And that idea of worshiping God and putting him first is a protection for us, because it connects us to the one unchanging being in the universe. There's a security and a foundation there that can't exist on any other basis, because it will be changing.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, I want to, just as you're saying that, I had a conversation with a student in my office just a few days ago, and she was so sweet. And let me set it up this way. Going back to Exodus 20, the wording is interesting in verse 5, where he says, thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, whatever our other gods are, right? nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I both thought about that.
Yeah.
The word jealous, when we hear it, it definitely has its own meaning.
Absolutely.
Right? And it's never a good meaning, right? It's always something we're supposed to avoid as humans. And it's one of those where it's like, oh, but God gets to be jealous, right? And I love the Hebrew, right? It's one of those great footnotes. So when you click on it, the Hebrew word is kana, which means possessing sensitive and deep feelings. So the student comes in, and you could tell that her heart was saying one thing and her head was saying another. And so the head conversation was, and I'm going to paraphrase her question because it kind of took her a second to get it out, but basically several questions she asked were at the basis of this. Isn't God kind of narcissistic to create a plan where he's the only answer? Like, if he already knows what we're going to do, like, isn't it kind of weird that he creates this plan that, like, focuses on him? Like, that we have to... And then, like, she caught herself, and, like, even just saying those words, I could tell she was having a hard time. She's like, but I know that that's not true, but doesn't it kind of seem that way? Yeah. And so, again, I could tell in her heart she didn't believe that God was narcissistic. But she had been hearing some things, and you know, we live in a world. I had heard that before, I knew exactly that she was being informed by people who may not believe in God. I think that is one of the things that gets thrown out there is like, why would anyone want to worship this selfish being who makes them the center of the universe, and that you have to pay all your devotion to you, and then they go back to building self again, and you everything that you need in this life is already within you, and blah 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 blah. Okay?
Yep.
So give me your thoughts on that. What would you have said? I'm curious. I'll put you in my office with that student. Isn't God narcissistic by commanding us to love him first above everyone and anything else?
No. Okay, good. Now we can move on. No.
Now leave my office. I have other things to do.
You are wrong. That's why people come to your office and not mine. No, I've heard that before plenty of times. I have a number of people that I know and am friends with who are no longer religious, no longer believe in God at all, and have said things like, if this is God, I don't want to be in heaven anyway. I don't want to live with a person that's that full of himself or what have you. It's a very common thing now. And part of it is we're putting our own human emotions onto him. We're putting our own foolishness onto him, our own way that we deal with relationships onto him, which is unfair.
Yep.
Rather than asking him and looking to him for what he's wanting. And I think where I start is this idea is it's not about him. It's not about him. This idea of like, you have to turn to him. You have to do this. It's not because he's sitting up in heaven desperately lonely and hoping that someone will pray to him. Is that every single thing he's doing, when we love him, it puts us in a place where we can actually, and even going to this idea of like, become your best self. Well, that's how it is. He's putting us in a place, doing this allows us to stop and see what is actually best for us. And I don't even know if I'm answering the question now, but I feel sometimes we are the very worst judge of what is the best thing for us to do.
That's a true statement, which is kind of a scary statement.
Right? We are all so unbelievably blind to our own lives. So
short-sighted.
Myopic is the word President Nelson uses, right? Partly it's just because I see things from my own perspective, and I have my own framework, and I have my own prejudices and my own biases, all of these things that are working against me, and my own blind spots. And there's such big blind spots, I don't even know I have blind spots.
Yeah.
And so by the Lord asking me to put him first, it puts me in a position where I can at least start to be somewhere where someone can help me see what I'm missing.
That's why it's almost exactly opposite. I think in some ways the Hebrew meaning of that word, of him being a jealous God, I don't think that he possesses deep and sensitive feelings as far as being jealous in the way that we are, and that's the projection that we put on him, right? Because that's our experience with jealousy. It seems to be he means I am a jealous God in the fact that I know what will bless you. I know what will help you. That's why I say thou shalt and thou shalt not, because I love you. I have deep and sensitive feelings about you.
Yes.
That's the way I'm a jealous God.
Right. And you put that jealousy there, this idea of like, I'm jealous because I could have changed your life. I could have made your life so much better.
I know how good it can be.
But you went to this other God who told you what you wanted to hear with your itching ears, and gave you the pat on your head and told you to run and go and pick marigolds, as Elder Holland would say. And you got that. And what you got was nowhere close to what you could have had. And you see that in Exodus 20, right? The idea of jealous God and will visit this, curse you until the third and fourth generation. That sounds horrifying. But what that is that's a real statement of, these are the deep and sensitive feelings I have. I am so deeply hurt by this because I know how deeply this will hurt you if you start worshiping some of these other false gods that will have massive generational repercussions.
Now think of our conversation about, is it actually God who's doing the cursing or punishing? Or is he flat out saying your choices to follow those gods will lead to a cursed life?
Absolutely.
That's why I commanded put me first, because I know what will bring you lasting joy. I know what will bring a connection with me and link you to me. And that's why I'm saying
and what will bring you and your children and
your children's children.
And which is a whole different ballgame. Because I'm with you on our conversation there. Is not God being up in heaven and being angry. Like, by the way, your great-great-grandpa was an idiot, so therefore I'm now cursing you. That's not how that works.
Thinking of the movie of Holes.
Right. Go find that pig. Okay, so but there is very real, and I think, our students talk about it all the time. It's a very modern phrase of generational trauma, but the simple reality is, everybody knows that there are things in your life that are not the way that you would like them to be, because people way before you made bad choices.
Chose other gods.
They chose other gods.
And there's a package deal that comes with those other gods.
And that's part of what we're looking at is once again, this no gods before me it's one of the most protective, beautiful things that you can do. You can sign up with me where it's goodness and light and happiness and blessings, or, well, the other team's offering death and hell if you want, right? And you see it. And you see it, and it's terrifying if you actually look at it.
Okay, now I'm having a moment as you're saying that again, and to bring it back down to ground level. I'm thinking about some of the patterns and habits where I continue to choose other gods in watching TV and in sports, in the way I talk about certain people, right? And some of my snarkiness. I'm just like, I'm doing some soul searching here a little bit, and I'm thinking of how much of that I have seen creep up into my kid's life. And when I exhibit it, it's okay. But when I see it in my kids, like, I just am like going, stop it. What are you doing? Like, get off the couch. Why are you watching another game? Or why are you scrolling on your phone? Or why are you this or that? And now, just as you're saying that, I'm starting to think that is part of my consequence, probably, for my choices at times. And I'm still trying to repent and work on it. There's still hope for me and my kids, I hope.
Yes.
But I think that's what it starts to look like in a 2025 world. Is this is why I think the first commandment and second commandment are still so timeless and relevant. Is because even in small, it's not like I'm going to go choose. I'm not leaving the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I am not going to leave my covenants behind. But in small and simple ways, sometimes I do choose other gods, and that has effects on my children and might have effects on their children. Right? There's some patterns that I am kind of responsible for in some ways.
I know, and that's actually the worst part about having kids is when you see yourself in your kids, and it's not the good part of yourself that you're seeing in your kids. You're seeing,
where did they learn that? Right. And there's the mirror.
And you pray and you work, and I do, and I pray that my kids will be better than I am. Because I hope that they've learned from me both good things, and I hope that they learn and say, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to make that same mistake that Dad made on a regular basis. And hopefully I'm also and this is, I think, where we come back, because I think there is going back to some of our perfectionism episodes, there's a danger of being like, well, every day I'm stressed out all day long. Am I worshiping the wrong God? No, sit down and relax every once in a while. But there is this moment of, okay, this is where daily repentance comes in. And I think just the best way to choose God and to put him first and to worship him above and before all else is to discover the joy of daily repentance. If I'm doing that, I'm in this continual state of being like, all right, I'm continually working to get myself where you are my priority. You are my number one. You are the arbiter of all other priorities. And that's where the daily repentance comes in, because it is this constant question of like, where am I? Because it is difficult. We live in a world of an infinite number of gods. and
that's true.
And I hope I say this right. Sometimes we talk about false gods. We're like, those silly false gods that are complete. No, these false gods are powerful. They can give you things. They can, for lack of a better word, bless your life. Although I wouldn't call it blessings, but they can give what appears to be really good things into your life, happiness into your life, and pleasure into your life, and just excitement, and they're there.
Yeah.
And they have power, and to pretend like they don't is a dangerous place to be.
We wouldn't give a portion of our lives to them if they didn't
provide
something. As you're saying that, just this quote popped into my mind from Elder Uchtdorf back in April 2022, because with this infinite number of gods and all these choices, again, I liked what you're saying is like to not get too perfectionistic, to get it can be overwhelming.
It can be.
Again, and then I've got kids and I'm trying to be a good disciple, and my calling in my ward, am I messing people up, right? And it's like, again, we can have different priorities, we can love lots of things, but I love the simplicity of these first two commandments. And then again, I love the simplicity of the Savior giving his interpretation, saying, okay, here's two great commandments. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and love thy neighbor as thyself. And Elder Uchtdorf said this: as we seek to purify our lives and look unto Christ in every thought, everything else begins to align. Life no longer feels like a long list of separate efforts held in tenuous balance. Over time, it all becomes one work, one joy, one holy purpose. It's the work of living and loving and serving God. It's loving and serving God's children. When we look at our lives and see 100 things to do, we feel overwhelmed. When we see one thing, loving and serving God and his children in 100 different ways, then we can work on those things with joy.
That's so good.
Isn't that cool? I saw this, I can't remember if it was a meme or something, but it was like an office space, an office cubicle, and it was a to-do list, and there were like 13 lines to fill out on the to-do list, but only 2 of them were filled out, and the rest were blank. And the first one said, love God, and the second one said, love people. And I remember just saying, and again, this idea of God is not trying to make this harder, and so he's really trying to use this kind of simple. Let me simplify how to navigate a bunch of things that you're going to love and a bunch of different priorities that you're going to be encountered with in this world. Start with the first one. And everything, focus on that. Like whatever you're doing today, if you can ask the question, am I loving God and am I loving people? Yep. And if you can start with that, you'll be able to figure out where everything else goes.
And I love that. And in that order, that am I loving God? Because loving God will teach me how to love people. Because it's tricky. Love is a tricky thing.
Oh, the world uses that word in a very
different way.
Lots of different ways.
And very
it's not his.
If we're going to play with narcissistic ways, like the incredibly narcissistic ways.
Yeah.
You will love me the exact way that I am demanding to be loved.
Yeah.
Versus if I love God, I know how to do this. And it also informs regular things. And as Elder Uchtdorf says, as you quoted here, there's a real power in being this choice to do such and such with my family is not me choosing something instead of God. If I'm doing this from this perspective of I'm loving God and I have my priorities in order, all of a sudden family game night is not putting Monopoly over to God. It is using what I have before me to create a beautiful family, to love my children in the way that God has asked me to love my children.
Which I think we can do. I mean, on my better days, I try to do that. I try to, when I'm putting God first, now everything else is a means to that end. Like I'm using the time at work. I'm using the time even in recreation. I'm using my friendships. I'm using time with my family in recreation or whatever. But it's not an end in and of itself. But this is how I'm loving God. This is how I'm loving people. And it changes how you do it, how long you do it, the way, right? Just it feels different because again, it's the first commandment educates me on how to do that appropriately,
and it shifts, as you said, it shifts your intention and intentionality. Those are words that keep popping up in General Conference recently, and there's plenty of things that I don't do intentionally that aren't necessarily bad, but they're not good either, just because there's no intention behind them, but that they could be good if I just had a little bit more thought behind it as to why I was doing it and what's going on with it. There's a quote that I found that I've known for a while and went and found it again from President Kimball. Back in the 1970s, he wrote an article for the Ensign on false gods that we worship, which is a sort of a watershed first presidency message from the Ensign. The first time I actually read it, I was at BYU in one of my political science classes. At the end of the semester, after studying international relations and primacy and power theory and all of these things.
Sounds horrible.
Yeah, make better choices, kids. So, but I don't know. It's better than German, but no. So, but
touche.
Either way, we're both in a worthless situation here. But but as we're here, we read it. The professor handed it out as the final reading of the course. We talked all about military strength and political strength and diplomatic things and what's the right thing. And he sends out, this idea of like, okay, what false gods are you worshiping by the end of this semester? And it was a really eye-opening thing. But there's this thing right here that President Kimball says, which I just love. Few men have ever knowingly and deliberately chosen to reject God and his blessings. Rather, we learn from the scriptures that because the exercise of faith has always appeared to be more difficult than relying on things more immediately at hand, carnal man has tended to transfer his trust in God to material things. And it was that idea of knowingly and deliberately at the beginning is what I keep coming back to, and as I've pondered these commandments, is that one of the things that the first commandment does is it forces me to be intentional in my choices. And too often, way too often, I am not intentional in my choices. I am, as Paul would say, driven about by the winds of doctrine. Whatever happens, all right, okay, I'm a fly by the seat of my pants type of person. And yet the first commandment requires a level of intentionality that no other gods require. And that intentionality changes everything about my day, everything about all of my interactions. If I can knowingly and deliberately start making my choices will be different. And from an agency standpoint, all of a sudden I am using my agency in the way that it was intended, with accountability, with knowledge, with intentionality, rather than just being free and not having any thought behind what I'm doing.
Okay, question for you.
Yeah.
So what are your false gods?
That's not fair. You always have me confess first. So
I've confessed several.
That's true.
Have you not been listening?
No, I have a lot of false gods.
Okay, what's your biggest one? What's your go-to? What's the one?
I mean, it's 2025. Yeah. It's false god or idol. I guess either or. My phone. It's so easy at the end of a long day to just put it on and. Like I go deaf. Sue will verify. It drives her bonkers. But sorry, but that's definitely it is. Like it's really easy. It's distraction. So I mean, the phone exemplifies it. That's the idol, but maybe the false god is distraction and brainlessness. I have on my list so many things that I want to do, so many things that I need to get done, so many books I would love to read, and then at the end of the day I'm tired, and so I'll just. So if we're going to start at the top, that's one right there. Distraction, my phone, it's a false god. Absolutely it is.
It's a bugger. It's a bugger.
Well, and part of it, once again, intentionality is the phone is completely and utterly neutral.
Totally neutral.
And even a lot of things on the phone. Social media is a neutral thing. Yeah. It can be for so much good, but if I have God first in my life, I do it differently. And there are excuse me, there are times during my day where I'm clearly making that choice, where I'm using it for scriptures, using it to listen to things, to learn, and to connect with people. But, well, I'm dying.
You're getting choked up here talking about your false god.
You have to take over. We might actually have to pause. I'm back and alive. Apparently my false gods were not happy about confession. But I think if we're going to look at other false gods, I think going back to one of my original comments that false gods are fickle and they change so much. What I've found in my life is that for different seasons of my life, I have different false gods. And very often what I find is when I'm improving in one area, it usually exposes a weakness in another area. And that's where the danger lies. We've talked about this before, the C.S. Lewis idea that Satan works in extremes. Is I need to, and once again, this is one of the things that the first commandment does so well, is it keeps me in the middle. It keeps me right there with God rather than running to the extreme of this way or this way. And so sometimes it's jumping back and forth of where is my extremes. And so I would say one of my other false gods is extremes, of getting too caught up in something.
Yeah. That's a real thing. It's a real thing. Keely, you wanted to share something?
Mm-hmm. So there's like the scripture, and you guys can tell me where it's at because I don't know where it's at. That says like we loved him because he first loved us. Mm-hmm. Where's it at?
First John 4.
Verse 19.
Yeah. You guys are awesome.
That's one of my favorites. Give me those short one-liners and I got those ones down.
Yeah. But I just think about like how you guys, there's that girl with that question about like, is God a narcissist? And I just think no, because he loved us first and that's why we should love him. Yeah. And like, that's the whole point that he made this plan, is because we are his children and he wants us to return back to him, and he wants us to be better and grow. And I just think about like, there's no way that he could be a narcissist because everything is about us, and he will always choose us. He'll always want us to come to him. It's like the idea that we've talked about where like the atonement is a gift and you just have to accept it. It's the same with God's love. It is always there. He's always waiting at your door, waiting for you to open the door for him. I think about when I was growing up and I was younger, whenever I was upset, I didn't want anybody to come in. And so my parents would like lightly knock on the door and they're like, hey, Keely, like, are you ready to talk now? And I'm like, that's what God's doing. He's always at the door being like, hey, when you're not upset, I'm here because I love you. And so why shouldn't he ask for our love back? Like, it just makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
I love that. Elder Holland said it, and he said it a couple different occasions that, that means we're onto something with that little alarm.
What's going on? Sorry.
The first great commandment is that we love God with all of our heart, mind and strength, right, and soul. But the first great truth is that God loved us that way first.
Yeah.
And I just love that order again, that because he loves us with all of his heart, then the invitation is to then become all that you can become and to receive all that I want to give you. I command you to love me the way that I love you.
Yes, and I love that quote from Elder Holland and this idea that Keely's brought forward, and I think it's so powerful, and we've sort of touched around the edges of this, but in you asking me what my false god is one of my other false gods, and I think everybody has this false god, so I'm not alone in this, is I have my own false misconceptions about God, and so I've created a false god that I feel like I'm actually worshiping the true God.
That's dangerous.
Which is dangerous. And it's the same idea. Jesus warns of false Christs in the last days, and he's not talking about random weirdos on the street who are announcing that they're Jesus.
I think that's what is in most people's heads. When we hear that, we're like, oh yeah, false Christ. It's these random guys who all of a sudden jump up and protest at conference or try to get a following and cult leader.
And that's clearly not it, because we're told that these false Christs will lead away many. And the false gods, the most dangerous of false gods, and even we see Satan all the time from the beginning pretending to be Christ. And we see this moment of the most dangerous of false gods are the false gods that make us believe that we are keeping the first commandment. And so this moment of I love here said, we love him because he first loved us, which goes back to that lovely question, which Keely should have answered instead of me, is God a narcissist? The simple answer is no, because God loves us and narcissists don't love people.
Yeah.
He loves us. And I just got done with my Parables of Jesus class, and we were talking Matthew 25 and talking about the parable of the talents, and the reason why the person with one talent refuses to do anything with it and buried it is because I know thee, and I know that thou art a hard man, right? This idea. And the simple answer is he didn't know his master, because if he'd known his master, he would have behaved differently. He would have known that he is a merciful man. He would have known that he loves effort, right? And this moment of how often do we worship false gods by assuming that we know God without putting in the effort to actually know God.
As he is.
As he is. So maybe, I'm sitting here, maybe the correct answer is, how do I keep this commandment? The best way to have no other gods before him, and the best way to love God with all my heart, might, mind, and strength, is to put all my heart, might, mind, and strength into knowing him. And to have no other gods before him is to put him first at my first of my list of things that I need to know, people that I need to know. If I have that in place, then I will not worship false gods, because I will be working to know the true God and not be carried away by others who would pretend to be him.
You're making me think. Okay, I'm going to ask you another question, and it's a hard one because I don't know
enough
if
hard
I
questions
know
today,
and because I don't know how I would answer it yet. But so that's why I'm going to put you on the spot first. But but two verses, just as you're saying that, came to mind. I think it's Mosiah 5:13.
Yes.
Who knoweth a man the master whom he has not served, and is far from the thoughts of intents of his heart. Yeah. Right. So I love that. So to keep the first commandment, I need to serve him, and he needs to be close to the thoughts and intents of my heart. And then I'm thinking of the prayer that the king of the Lamanites offered in Alma 22 when Aaron is teaching him. And he said, I will give away all my sins to know thee. Yeah. Right? I think there's some very practical ways that I can keep that first commandment in a effort to know him as he is.
Yes.
I can distance myself from sin, and I can really lean into his service and try to keep my thoughts and my intentions focused on him. And I think, and again, that's not an over the night process, and that's not new, that's not revolutionary, but again, to be more intentional about those two things will, I think, help me know him as he is.
Yes.
So here's my question.
I'm like, this is great. I'm not hearing a hard question yet.
Yeah, no. But I'm pretty fascinated by this idea of maybe one of the false gods that most of us worship is our own interpretation of God, our own maybe preferred interpretation of God. So can you think of some of those interpretations for you personally that you've had to let go of, adjust, say goodbye to, because they were not him as he is?
That is a hard question, because I know over the years my conception of God has changed and grown, and it's an interesting thing. I think one of the things that I have had to change over the years is some of the things we've talked about quite a bit in the podcast. I view God as a much more merciful God now than I did in the past, and this is not because I'm like, ooh, I really hope he is. It's because that's what I'm seeing the scriptures and prophets say, and that's changed me. We've mentioned this before. I was used to be a much harsher person in judgment in a lot of ways. And I'm not seeing that as much scripturally, and I'm trying to change that. This might sound silly, and everyone's like, wow, okay. But like, it's a big deal, because if I have a conception of God in a way where he is, going back to Matthew 25, and hard man, and reaping where you have not sowed, and gathering where you have not strawed, it changes my interactions with him. It changes my desire to follow him. It changes my desire to do what he asks me to do. So that's some way that I've had to change. I've literally had to change and stop and think and realize that I was worshiping a false god. And part of this comes back to, honestly, President Nelson's invitation to discover the joy of daily repentance, of this change of a God who's like, all right, he's repenting again, facepalm, wow, Marshall's stupid, to, isn't it awesome that Marshall's growing every day? Isn't it awesome that Marshall's still trying? And that's a major change. And it may sound silly to say that that was a false god that I was worshiping, but it really was a false god that I was worshiping. And it was keeping me from the real God. In my life, I've worshiped a God of perfectionism rather than a God who perfects. And that was a dangerous God to worship. I've also probably at times, well, not probably, I have at times worshiped a God and made him in a way that was way too merciful because I wanted to get away with some stuff. And so I'm like, oh, he's chill. And so I've worshiped a chill God rather than a God who actually follows rules and has boundaries. And wow, I'm just confessing all over the place, aren't I?
I'm pulling it out of you. I'm pulling it out of you.
So
no, that's good. My mind's actually similar because I didn't know how I'd answer that. So I thought, okay, I want to ask Marshall because I thought that's a really fascinating question for anyone who's listening right now. There are false gods that look like money and pride and power. I think some of mine is vain ambition.
Yeah.
I think sometimes I fall in love with being needed.
Yeah, right.
That's a whole other journey conversation.
Next week. Huh?
Yeah, next week to be continued. But then as you kind of introduce this idea of maybe one of the false gods that we all need to maybe stop worshiping is our own image of God that we've kind of built up in our minds. I've kind of felt, I think I've kind of, bumper bowling is the best way I can explain it, kind of those two truths. I don't know if I think my first image of God was high love. I think that's what drew me to him is I felt him loving me. I felt that he offered his son for me. Like I was very drawn to his love. But then I needed to encounter this part of God was high expectation also. And so I had to let go of some of my, oh, well, he just loves me no matter what. And it's like, well, I gotta step up. I gotta do some things. I need to love him back. I need to, but then I definitely probably went too far that way. And again, this whole idea of how you and I view God, how we keep this first commandment informs the rest of our priorities. I was probably pretty judgmental. I was pretty black and white when it came to issues. And so I felt the Spirit like trying to teach me this true God of mercy and love. And that was so intriguing to feel more of that again and how merciful he was. I may have gone too far that way because I know here at the Institute, honestly, there were life-changing things and courses that I taught and people that I met that really opened up the idea of how loving and kind and merciful God is that I had maybe underemphasized. And I fell so in love with that God that honestly over the last year, I think he's been introducing this other side of him again of like, Ryan, don't forget that I am perfect love and perfect expectation. Yeah. And anyway, so somewhere in between that going back and forth, I find myself having to let go of anything lesser than a wholeness of God.
I love that phrase. And that's the journey, right?
Yeah.
Because you start with Mosiah 5:13, like how knoweth the man the master whom he has not served and is far from the thoughts and intents of his heart. I can't help but connect that to John 17:3. For this is life eternal, that they might know thee, the only true God. There is a connection between our quest to truly know God and our ability to enter into his presence. And I come back to Elder Holland. We have to go to Sinai flowing with thou shalt and thou shalt nots. And the very first thou shalt not is actually a thou shalt. Thou shalt not worship other gods, which is an inherent thou shalt worship me. Thou shalt learn of me. Listen to my word, know me as a whole. And that's where I'm at, is exactly, I'm bouncing these back and forth, trying to really fully understand. And it's difficult, but it's, am I trying as hard as I can to stay within the boundaries of scriptures and prophets and to really fully understand? And when it does, it's both wonderful and hard because it demands something of me that wasn't being demanded before.
In my classes over the last week, we've been talking about the law of sacrifice, and Elder Ballard talks about that sacrifice is the true manifestation of love, and you can measure your degree of love for God and his son and the gospel by what you're willing to sacrifice for those things. I think those first two commandments invite us to say, okay, it's one thing to say that you love God. Yeah. That will be determined by what you're willing to let go of. Yeah. Right, and how those priorities start to shape themselves, and so this is good for me. I'm just thinking about these two commandments again, and I know why he gives them. I love the idea of this conversation of it's for me, it's not for him. No. Like he is so secure with who he is and where he's at, right? But he loves me, and he has delicate and passionate feelings for me, and so his invitation is for me to distance myself from anything that would keep me away from a fullness of coming to know him. And so that's, I want to keep pondering that and seeing where that takes me.
No, I love that so much. And I grabbed my phone because I wanted to see if I could find it.
Because you're addicted to your false
right,
God. Oh, no, you're using it for a good thing. Okay,
Thank you so much. But as you said, this reality, and it's something C.S. Lewis said that is so powerful. He says, if we insist on keeping hell or even earth, we shall not see heaven. If we accept heaven, we shall not be able to retain even the smallest and most intimate souvenirs of hell.
I got to let go of some things.
We got to let go of some things. God's first commandment is an invitation for us to put our priorities in order and to let go of anything that's going to keep us away from the greatest gift that he could possibly give.
That's good. Do we leave anything out?
About 5 million things, but we'll come back to this sometime.
Come back to it. We'll lean into the third commandment next time.
Which has a lot to do with this.
It does. It does. Thanks for the chat.
Thank you so much, Ryan.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Gospel Chats, and we'll catch you on the next chat.